Let's just get straight into it. Let me share my screen. Right. Wait for the approval. Perfect. Okay. And I'm going to share my entire screen. Perfect. Okay, great. So let me just hop over straight into Blender and let's get right into it. So this is to cap off last week. And my name is Adabody, and I'm going to be going through how to use Blender and Claude together to create custom scripts to make engines that will make very advanced systems for augmented reality that are running with basically nothing. Like, for instance, this one right in front of me right here has all these hundreds of particles and wireframes and all kinds of things. And it's like, I think only a megabyte. And as you're going to see, the other engines that I am creating with Claude, they are very tiny too. So they look animated, very complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. That's why I like to call it like an engine, because it's there's a lot of parameters that powers it, and there's it really pulls off a sense of simulation, and like, for instance, like liquid simulations or particle effects. In Blender, a lot of times we would actually use real particle simulations and all that stuff, but to get that into augmented reality is very difficult, and to get it to like work and be able to change parameters on a dime, super wild hard. But with this process, you'll be able to have, like you see right here in front of you, this is a very complex particle simulation, and this all works inside of AR, and is something that's easily able to export with the same export settings that we've been doing, except now you don't have to worry about truly running a simulation, which if you've ever done inside of Blender, it can get pretty complex, and then transferring that to AR, even more complex. So yeah, so this one right here, I can kind of go over. This is the one I did. It's called Crystal Stream. And I did this for the Venice exhibition. And as you'll see, there's a couple of different ones going in here. It's great that it's color coded, but as you could see, you can combine these engines. You can combine these scripts to make multiple different things, is what I did here. So I have like a wireframe kind of meshing, pulling apart with like the other two that are kind of schooling around like a school of fish or like buzzing bees. And that one, I will admit, this one took about probably a month of me iterating with Claude and getting it just the way I wanted it, to the point where you can see it right now. Like, this is to me like almost like an application where I have all these different parameters that can affect right over here. See these ones in blue? It's all clearly labeled how to get the type of motion that I want. But again, this is something that takes a second, and where I was iterating with Claude until I got it just the way I wanted. But I'm going to show you guys something a bit more simple, but still the same exact workflow. And on top of that, just like I was telling you about this, it took me a month to get it to that point. You can keep iterating on your engine. So if you get it a really nice spot and you like it, you can just keep on going and keep iterating on that and making it more complex and making it more to your desires. So this is kind of like an end result, of what you could do while working with Claude to get the hone it in just right. But I've gone ahead and went into made a different project file. And this one is empty on purpose because I actually have two scripts that I had prepared beforehand. The last class that we did, I was kind of building it live with you guys to see what that would look like inside of Claude. So, you have right here, I already have Claude. It was, I could share the prompts with you. It's very simple. It's like, make me a geometry nodes engine for a particle effects. I want this to be in Python for Blender, right? And then it went on through. I don't have to redo that. We did that last week to kind of show what the different wording that you can use to get Claude to make these different kinds of engines. And really, it's up to you to be creative. You could it could be particles, or it could be, here's a pretty interesting one that I put together that I think you guys would like. I asked Claude this time not to make a particle effect, but I asked it to make us an orbit, like a solar system orbit with all the different planets. I said, make me an orbiting solar system, right? In geometry nodes inside of Blender, make me a Python script, because this is all running off of Python. And again, to get to this section, it's very simple. Right here, we're in the main layout that we went over in all the other courses. This is the object mode, right? All you got to do is go straight to this last tab over here on the top for scripting. And anything that Claude gives you, you just pull and drop over into here. And that's what I did. And that's how we got this orbiting planet. And when you're talking to Claude, you could also tell him, save this as a Python script. And that's what I have here. These are, excuse me, a illust particles. So right here, as you see, there's 3 different particle systems that I have, and also this solar system orbit. You literally just drag and drop it into here, and it pops into this. And we have
now. Let's just ruin their antibody.
Oh, let me put that back. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep, you got it.
So boom, perfect. Okay, so once you drag and drop that Python script into here, you'll see something like this. And this is what I wanted to go over today, which is something that I didn't have a chance to last week. And I think this is really the meat of the whole situation. So, now that you got your script, and you've put it into this this Python scripting area inside of Blender, it should come up with this whole set of numbers. It looks pretty confusing. You really don't have to worry about much, especially like for this engine, for this orbiting engine. There is this configuration area. I'll highlight it right here. This is all we really have to worry about. And at first it can look confusing, but just pay attention to the numbers. For instance, the total frames. That's how many frames this animation is going to go by. The seed, what that means is like randomly how this is going to be placed, all the planets and different things like that. So you can say, for instance, you didn't like the way that last one went, you can rearrange it. And before I keep on talking, let me just show you what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead, now that I've dragged and dropped this Python script into here, I'm going to press the play button up at the top corner right here. And boom, check this out. You can't see it very well over here, but if I go back to the layout tab over here on the top left corner, we have an entire solar system. We have the sun, we have the moon, we have Earth. Excuse me. And I have allergies around here. And then if I go one step further and take it over here into the full blend mode, you can get a real good sense of how it's actually rendering out. But we don't need to worry about that. We'll still stick to this for now. This render mode, which is the one that has like that half shaded looking ball. If you press play now, check this out. It actually animates. And very, very awesome, because now you can grab this. This is a full solar system animation with, if you can see, there's even Saturn has a bit of a wobble to it. The moon is rotating around the Earth. Everything's rotating around the sun. And this was done within, I think this took Claude about 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes to put this together. Once it saved that Python script and I put it in the scripting area, boom, press play. And now we got a full solar system. And what's really great about this is the way that Claude builds out these systems. They are very, very friendly with AR. So as soon as I, have this part done, I follow the same export settings that I did before with how we've been doing it for the whole class. And you have access to all of that. And, we can go through that again, but it will totally take everything that we see here and create it and put it into augmented reality. Totally fine. And then what's more is that these files are incredibly small, because when Claude is making this through Python, he's kind of like, all the modeling is very bare bones. So there's very little vertices in here. The amount of materials is very low. And so I think this one came out to like 200 kilobytes. So imagine that, a whole solar system revolving around you and, working totally fine inside of augmented reality. but it's like 200 kilobytes. So it's going to work even on a toaster phone. And you'll have all these particles moving around you. And so very cool. But at the same time, there's more. There's more that we can do, especially to make this our own and to do things that are, you know, I guess, yeah, to get wild with it. So if we go back into the scripting area, we have a couple options here. So we have this total frames. We could change that, from 120 to whatever. And this is another thing too, just one caveat. Sometimes the engines aren't working exactly as you would hope they would, or as they are planned, even in the configurations. So you have to sometimes go back with Claude saying, hey, I noticed that you have this parameter that I can affect, but it didn't work. Claude will look at it and go, oh, that's right. I must have coded this wrong. And then that feature will work correctly. So for this one, the frames didn't work too well for me. So I'm going to put that at 200. I'm going to put the seed to 80. And I hope you guys can see this is where I'm just affecting these numbers. And I'm also kind of like, usually when I affect the numbers or the parameters of the engine, I'm a little bit exaggerated so I can see the effect. If I just like move it over by 0.1, I don't know what's really going to happen. But if I'm like doing big numbers, like, from 1 to 10 or 100 or something, you'll definitely get a sense of what the different parameters and how they're affecting the engine. So I have the seed at 80. I'm not going to mess with this. This looks pretty complicated. I would actually ask Claude to make this into a bit easier format for me to edit. But look over here on the bottom, we have asteroid numbers. So yeah, it's cool. We could put the asteroid numbers. Maybe let's put it to 1,000 so we could see more of them. And then we see these background stars that we have, which is really cool too. We can set that to 20,000. Yeah, just so we could see what it does. And now we can just run this script again. Boom. Might take a second. All right. And if we look now at the layout, we see all those effects and all those changes. So now we have clearly way more asteroids. We have much more stars. And so this is, again, simply how you can affect the parameters within the scripting to have the change in the layout section here. And I also want to mind you, this is running incredibly fast. This Mac that I'm on is not the fastest, but the fact that it's running with that 20,000 stars and all these extra asteroids, it's running perfectly, very smooth, without any hiccup. So I think that's just another huge caveat, or not a caveat, but advantage of this. And then real quick, just while we're here, if you wanted, this is another thing that's really simple about these things. Claude already probably has assigned colors to all of these planets already. So if we want to affect that, all we have to do is simply click on whatever planet or whatever object we want to affect. And then we want to go over here to this bottom part where it says materials. And look, now we have access to that material. So if, say, for instance, Earth, is what this one is right here, didn't like that material too much, I could change this base color now to make it a red Earth. And if I want it more metallic, I could do that. And I could pull the roughness down. And so now it really can become, you guys see that too, which becomes shiny, like a shiny ball. The materials are very easy to affect as well. And it's really straightforward. It's like click on it, affect the materials. If you want to change any parameters of it, do it inside of the engine, the scripting engine itself, and you'll have a lot of fun with it. This is something you could really spend a lot of time with, not only just iterating it within Blender, but going back into Claude and saying, I would like this extra parameter. And that's really cool because you'll start getting ideas being like, the wobble on Saturn is too much. Can I have a control that allows me to affect the wobble of Saturn? And then what Claude will actually do is put that parameter inside of the Python script for you then to ease up that wobbling so it's not so much. And that way you never have to really animate anything. You're not touching a single line of keyframing or any of that stuff. Claude's doing all that for you, but you have all those parameters to affect procedurally inside of the scripting area. So this is one engine I had a lot of fun with. And like I said, you can keep on going with this and doing iterations with Claude and fixing it up. But I'm going to go back to one that was kind of almost embarrassing from last week. We made this vortex of stars. And when we had first ran the code, it kind of looked really bad. So let me just go ahead and pull that up too. So remember this one, the star vertex tornado. Excuse me a second. Excuse me. New York, how deliveries are. Anyways, okay, so let me go back, to this. This is that one that we made from last week. I made this live, and if I press play now, let's check this out. Oop, actually, let's go back to where it was. I think I already affected it a little bit. I want you guys to see the bad version first, because it did not look this cool at first. So we'll go 5 stars, and then see the minimum and maximum. Let's just leave it like that. This is fine. That way I don't have to mess with anything too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and press play now. And actually, let's delete all this and press play. So this was kind of what we had last week. And as you see right here, it's kind of looks different because I was affecting, again, the parameters. But it was made these really crappy looking stars that I was not happy with. They look like kind of like Star Spangled Banner stars, like going in a vortex. And yeah, it was definitely not very impressive, but that's where I wanted to kind of go into the scripting section itself to show you that while it might have looked poor at first, you can really do some cool stuff even with this engine. So one of the things that I went to right off the bat is we have these configurations in this particular engine. And also, I kind of skipped over this, but I really want you guys to see this. When you load multiple scripts inside of Blender, inside this whole area in the scripting section, you actually have a drop down of all these different scripts. So you have the solar system one that we had right here, but also now I have in my arsenal and a drop down, I have this tornado one as well. And so really on a dime, you can switch between different engines. You can stack the different effects. That's kind of like what I did with the wire meshing one, with the particle effects and all that. I have multiple engines that are kind of overlaid, but they're following a very similar motion path. And so it feels like they're together. It doesn't feel like one's going off really far from another. It feels nice. And that was based on my taste and my direction. But again, just to showcase, like it's so simple. Once you get these Python scripts in here, you literally have like a drop down, different list of things that you can do. And anybody's worked with Claude and their imagination starts going wild. You especially mine. I have a huge list of different engines. But anyways, let's get back into this star vortex. Right here, we have very simple parameters, I would say, to affect and give us a lot of results right from the start. So right here, this one stars, just basically, it even gives you a little explanation of what it means. Just means the total number of stars in the vortex. So right now we have it at 200. I can set this at, let's see, 500. We can do the tornado height. We can make this really big. Like I said, I like to exaggerate at first so I can really see the effect. The top and then the bottom, this is like how big it is or wide it is at the top versus the bottom. And so I have it pretty similar right now where it's like 20 to 15. I want to right now, let's do both of them. Let's do both of them 40. That way it's going to create a actual perfect cylinder. So it won't actually cone out. It'll be more flat because the top and the bottom are going to be the exact same size. And so then let's see here, twist speed, we'll leave that the same. And then I also want to put these star points down to 1 because I kind of like what that was doing. It made a debris field type look where each one is actually just like a square flat plane. So that's another cool thing. And then the thickness, is up to you, but I didn't really get much from the thickness. So I'm going to put that to 0. I like it actually being a little bit more thinner. So 0.01. And then the scale. This is basically saying how the range of the debris that's around or these stars of how big and how small they get. So this is the minimum of how small they're supposed to get. So they never get smaller than that. And then this is the maximum. They never get bigger than 2.2. So right now, let's just for, example's sake, I want to put this to 10. Yeah, just to really drive home the point. And then the smallest, we'll leave it there because I think if we go any smaller, you won't even see them. And then right here is the spin frames. And so if you look right here, this is a very interesting point. Do you see where it says this is the number of frames for it takes for a full 360 rotation? And the reason why that's important is if you want a seamless loop for your effect or for anything that you're doing, you almost always want a full 360 rotation because that's going to complete the full circle to get you to a loop. So at the moment, it's set to 120. We could set it to 140, for example's sake, to show, for instance, I want my animation to last this long. This is your chance to set the amount of the speed of how long it's going to take to make that rotation. So now that we have all this kind of set the way we want, or the way I was wanting, I'm gonna press play. And look at this. Yeah, quite a bit different. And so there's a big range between the different stars. And we also have now they look more like webs. Let's go back into the layout here. And so check this out. So this is just with me messing with it tiny little bit. And then as you see here, I have the end frame set to 140. So this should make because if you look here in the center, for this effect, I would choose to have the person in augmented reality be in the very center so that this is their view, right? And so if you press play now you have like this tornado surrounding everyone. And if you look clearly right here at the 140 mark, you'll see that it makes a perfect seamless loop. Right? And so when we plug this into augmented reality, with all the exporting settings that I have with all the other GLB files, this will work perfectly fine. And it'll just be like this perfect seamless thing that keeps happening over and over and over again. And everyone, it'll just be like, yeah, just a fun, thing. People won't think much of it, but looping is one of the most difficult things you can do inside of 3D, 3D rendering, right? And modeling and animation. Anytime you see those guys and have that seamless loop when they're like in a pausing situation, that takes a minute to get just right so that that cycle looks seamless. It doesn't look like there's a click or there's a nasty glitch. So right off the bat, Claude's helping us with so many different things that would have, take an artist eye and take experience with looping, and he's already done the math. Where now we just set it to where we want. Let's go back in here. I want it to be 160 frames because I want it to be a little bit slower. Press play, boom, and now we'll have the same thing, except just going just a tiny bit slower. And look, the end is already set to us at 160 frames. So essentially here, when we're in the layout mode, we're just testing it out to see, okay, it works just fine. So again, this is something where it's like you want to build the engines and be very creative with Claude, but get inside of the parameters and make it your own. Do anything you want. Get really twisted with it. Like I said, exaggerate the parameters so you could really see what they're doing. And then for the last final thing, like last test to get this in augmented reality, we're going to just do the same exact workflow we've been doing for all the other objects. Press select all by pressing A. So we'll have all these selected. We're going to go to export or file, export GLV. And then over here, I'm just going to name it AI file system 2. And I have mine already set to the export settings. But again, I'm just going to run over these one more time. Everything is the selected objects, only include that. We want to go into data and we want to go into here. And here's another thing too. When we were using Meshy, it had pre-built textures inside of it that we were utilizing, and those are pretty heavy. And that's why like compression of the materials and also us doing this whole export where we have set everything to WebP format, that was important to do then. But because we're using Claude's materials that it's made, they're bare bones. They're like carrying barely any information. So we don't even have to worry about materials. If we go into really the last thing that we want to do is I always put on compression just because just to make this file smaller. But the real big thing for here is to go into the animation mode. We click on this drop down right here on the bottom. We click on the animation mode. We want to click active actions merged. And then to see this bake and merged, make sure that that bake all objects and animations is clicked. That way, all the animations are happening at the same time. And then this is another pretty big thing that you want to make sure you're doing with these engines is when you, this drop down here, it says rest and ranges, you want to make sure that it's clicked limit to playback range. That means basically the animations is being cut right at the frames that you've assigned. So if you have 200 frames, this will make sure that it does not include any extra frames, and it keeps it only to those 200 frames, if that makes sense. If anybody has any questions about that, I'll totally go over that. But basically, it just ensures that you're not getting extra frames that might be in there. You know, you might have not seen the keyframe, for instance. Like sometimes there'll be keyframes out in like frame 200 or 400. And if you don't click that box, it will actually render all the way out to 600 frames or wherever that last keyframe was. So we don't want that. We want it to only, we want it to end at where we've set it right here at the start, beginning, and the end of the frame. So that way the animation is as long as we want it to be. Small little box, but very powerful. And so you just click on that. And basically at this point, there's really nothing else to mess with. You press export. And as you see, that exported immediately. It didn't even do the spinning wheel. It was so fast. So I can only imagine how small this came out. So if we go here, let's see here. Where did I save that actually? Let me check that again. Should have checked that. We'll do it in this folder since I already have it pulled up. And yeah, I had that in Venice. Okay, so go into illust particles. Perfect, right here. So we'll export into this one. And because I put remember settings, it's going to remember that same exact settings. And we don't have to adjust anything again. So now we have, look here, the AI systems too. And let's just see for information sake how big this is. This is 31 kilobytes. So cool. So, I mean, this, you could turn this into you could put this, you could inscribe this in Bitcoin. It's so small with animation and everything. So really, really neat. 31 kilobytes. And obviously to load this in to illust, pull this up, excuse me. Go into illust here. We're going to log in, same how we do here. Sorry, I should have had this already set up. But excuse me. But yeah, I'll tell you know, do a little talking as I'm getting this set up. But essentially, is this one of the most exciting techniques because of how efficient it is. Let me go here. Oh, excuse me. Got to do that with MetaMouse. I'm so sorry. I should have had this loaded up. But again, it's the same concept. You load it into illust as we've been doing for everything else. Just kind of want to have a thing for you guys to all scan and see how it interacts inside of your phone. But the optimization that's going on within Claude is incredible. And even just so let me go over here to into this other one right here. For the one that I did for the first particle system that I was showing. We go here into Venice. My gosh, I have so many files, excuse me. Let me search it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this one, the crystal stream, with all that stuff going on, this is 10 megabytes. Okay, so yeah, a bit bigger than I had thought. But if you look into the project file for this one, I mean, the amount of animation that's going on is ginormous. It's because all of it's baked inside. So you're seeing something that would usually be ran by a simulation. It's not running by a simulation no more. Each one of those particles is being keyframed and animated frame by frame. I didn't have to touch a single keyframe. That was all done with Claude. So, at the end of it, the big thing that's probably running this one up is actually probably animation information and probably some of the particles that after so many hundreds it does stack up. But again, man, this is something that for 10 megabytes, pretty impressive in my book. Let's see here. I wonder why this is taking so long. Take off the Wi-Fi. Maybe that'll be a little faster. A little more time. But either way, if this doesn't work, I definitely want to get to questions and make sure that everyone has anything that they want answered. But you guys all know how to put things onto illust by now. Essentially, it's the same exact thing. Upload the 3D object, place it how you want in the world scene and the tracking. And yeah, and it works very well. It works flawlessly. The fact that it's down to 31 kilobytes allows you really to feel really comfortable that your activation is going to run very well, and it's going to run consistently on everyone's phone because of just the amount of optimization, how small the file is. So I hope this one really helps and clears up and simplifies some things that I was going into last week. And yeah, needless to say that if you were to do this by hand and if you were to not use Claude Code to put, let me go back into Blender because this is being a bit slow for me. If you were to do any of this by hand, it would take forever. You would have to have an extensive knowledge of geometry nodes or modifiers. You would have to have an extensive knowledge of looping and timing. This is very advanced in every aspect, but with Claude, it becomes much more accessible to you, and it's really not that bad. It's actually quite fun when you're working with Claude to get all the different things together. Your mind and imagination kind of go run wild. So I hope this helps. And so sorry that I couldn't bring up the augmented reality of what this would look like in your living room. I'm still waiting on this to load. But yeah, this is exactly, yeah, this I like these types of experiences. This is what, so for instance, I did this, I relied on this heavily inside of Hands to God, where I had a particle effect system just like this running around you and spinning around you while I had my main 3D object in front of you. So it was very immersive. No matter where you turned your camera, you were always getting particle effects swimming around you. And then, but at the same time, that main feature piece was right there. So kind of to just really immerse you inside of this vortex of an activation. So yeah. See here. See if this finally went through. All right, yeah, I'm just gonna go back to you guys. But I hope that was great. That was my I'm gonna stop sharing now. That was this week's lesson and just kind of capping what we went over last week. And again, here for any questions. This is one I'm very excited about. Like you can really go in.
Yeah, dude, that was awesome. That was I felt like pretty crisp. So appreciate you jumping in and provide some more color on that.
For sure.
I would one of my questions is have have you produced any plugins or Claude Code driven projects that you've broken it, or like have you like what are like kind of like the boundaries, I would say, maybe of like some of the things that you might have created, or maybe there's certain things that Claude can do pretty well, or maybe certain things that you're like, oh, I tried this a bunch of times, but just doesn't seem to want to connect.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah. So while I will say it's a miracle worker, it is not an all-in-one. I would definitely say if you are like, for instance, things like modeling, I would not do that with Claude. You're just going to spend all your credits, and it's just never going to get it right. It understands geometric forms. It understands algorithm. It understands all that very, very well, but it does has a very poor time with understanding the composition and shape of an object. I tried to get it to generate me a skull, very low poly, easy peasy, and it came out with this weird, it looked like this, like when a baby's and almost not even born, and it just looks like a lizard. It turned into this weird thing, and I waited close to 2 hours for that to get done, and I spent all my tokens for like a quarter of my week. And it was a very I felt like a great experiment. I tried this out with almost all the different LLMs, with Gemini with their top version. I tried it out with Open AI with their top version. Modeling is not their thing, big time. If you want to have anything modeled, I would go Meshy. Meshy's for that. Meshy gets you the modeling done, and it gives you a really nice, clean mesh to work with, and that's where I would do that. But if it's for any type of systems, any type of like particle systems, water, um, any type of thing that's very algorithmic, based off of like Brownian philosophy, or math, or any of that type of stuff, it does that very well. But and it also, here's another thing too. I've tested out, trying, with the idea of building out my own modifiers and building out my own applications or plugins into Blender. It turns out the plugins are quite a bit more advanced. So, and on top of that, they are something you have to continuously update. So when Blender comes up with a new update, it's a big package to be able to update that plugin inside of Blender. So you can go down that route. It's just a lot more in depth, and there's just like a lot more commitment to it. And that's where the scripts are actually really neat. You can really, on a dime, make all these different scripts. Like I was showing you that drop down, you can have all these different engines, and it's really not much different than you would get from a actual plugin in Blender. Like I said, you get those configurations looking really nice and neat. I mean, all you have to do is just type in numbers rather than have a slide bar. And it's not that much more of an advantage, but way more work versus, one versus the other. So that would be my biggest thing. Um, and yeah, so I have looked into making plugins, and actually have been looking into making things that are a bit more substantial plug and play, a standalone plugins as well. I've been trying to get into VJ loops, where Claude and everything comes together. But again, that's when things get kind of get into the weeds, because now you're dealing with UI, you're dealing with updates. Where is it a standalone? Is it a plugin? There's quite a different a lot of different things to cover with that. But it's totally possible, and I'm in the midst of it. I'm actually doing a collaboration right now with FDOT that's really neat, that we're hoping is going to be a part of the live performance that he has in Canal Street. So yeah, it's a the imagination right now is it's probably one of the coolest things to have. Because, and then also thinking in systems and logistically, with logic, it's, man, it's you can really build out anything. I've actually, there's not a project I have not been able to do. But I'm a big time system thinker. I've built things in node trees within Blender, and also inside of music production as well. Very familiar with that. So the coding part was just the other side of it. And when you're dealing with node trees, you're just dealing with packages of programs or packages of code. So really, the big thing, in my opinion, is practicing your system thinking and logic thinking. Because especially with Fable, my gosh, just does the rest. So yeah, I hope that answers.
Good. Does anyone else have any questions for Out of Body? I got another one for you. So when you're, as we're kind of talking about systems and talking about almost like the planning of the build, do you go through any steps, or do you go through any kind of like a checklist of kind of how you want to build the logic or create the logic for this? Is there any recommendations or best practices that you've kind of encountered?
Right, absolutely. In fact, there's a couple things that I always make sure are covered. So with Python, and when Blender, or excuse me, when Claude is building with the Python scripts, you find out there's an infinite ways to crack an egg. You can have made that orbit, but it could have made it with geometry nodes. It could have just made it straight out flat like it did with empties and just remade planets. And so when you are directing Claude, it's always good to have in the back of your mind that one, this has to be exportable in augmented reality. So don't be making a simulation that only works inside of Blender, and then we can't take this out into augmented. It looks fantastic in Blender, but we just can't use it. Another big one is to, like, I always have looping in mind. So when I'm talking to it, I always say, give me a parameter in which I can adjust the length, but I want to, for instance, it kind of gets complicated for the particle simulations. Those particles are all in their own individual motion path. And so they have their own cycles. So that's where you have to think in fractions. So if there's one particle that's going twice the speed as the one that's next to it, it's going to make double the amount of loops as this first one. And so when you're building that logic out, you have to tell Claude about this. You have to say, please give me this parameter to be able to affect how, the different phasing of the different loops. And so, and that's all also another thing to, like, thinking ahead of time and how you build it will often save you a lot more tokens too, because while you can iterate with what you've had, it's like if you could have just one shot that from the beginning, you could have really saved yourself a lot of tokens, a lot of time. And so part of that systems planning is knowing ahead, like, where is this being suited for? Is this for augmented, or am I just doing an MP4? Having that already figured out, and then going inside with Claude and kind of already having that, the domino effect kind of already in plan, um, saves a lot of time and saves a lot of trouble. And you know, and also I just say, system thinking might be sound like a lot, but it's really not. It's so much, so more of like cause and effect. So like you run into this with sound design, you run into this with making materials and any type of node trees. It's just a bunch of if and thens, and so or signal processing. So if you have that in your mind where, for instance, you want a noise, and then you want that noise to then be a gradient that fix that noise so it stays inside of a sphere, and then you want that noise then to be colored with through a color ramp or something like that. That's what system thinking is. It's like cause and effect, and also there's this sense of like the signal processing really matters in in the chain. So if I have an effect that's closer to the beginning of the effect chain versus towards the end, you could have totally different outcomes. And this is something that if you approach with Claude Code, it's like I said, you're going to save so much time because you're already telling it, I want this to make sure that I am covering this and how it's being presented, and also how I want it to how I want it to be. And that's something that I think takes a bit of time, but once you start like thinking in that way always, it's just like the gift that keeps on giving, because it applies to everything. It's like any type of that's why it's called system thinking. You're going to always have that that signal processing in mind, where you're thinking about the 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to get to that final situation, and then the logic of why, if I switch the order, how it will come out so differently. um, all of that applies to Claude and how you word it and how you are building these out as well. Like I said, it took me probably a month to put that particle system the way I like it. And that's because I just kept going back and forth with it. As far like one of the big ones was figuring out that each particle has their own motion path, and that, you have to have a parameter that allows me to adjust just how much faster each one goes compared to the other. So the offset and all those different things. And that's part of that thinking ahead systems thinking that saves a lot of time, but also gets you really insane results.
That's awesome, man. Um, if you're open to it, I mean, I'd love to, like, if you have like a one of the chat discussions or like the histories of like you like building a plugin. I think that would be kind of helpful just to see kind of how you
Right.
communicated with the machines and
Okay.
and then yeah, and I could throw that into like the classroom notes too. So um
Sick.
yeah, because I think it is a very like it it's a very dynamic process. It's like you get something, you're like, okay, like tone it down, make this, the effect is not where I want it, etc. So I think that'd be really helpful. My last question for you is beyond Claude, and just kind of talking about plugins in general. I'm wondering, like, are there any plugins that you're just like a big fan of, or like things that you jumped into that you'd like to share?
Oh yeah. So one of my favorite plugins, and I didn't get into with these set of courses. Maybe it's
Yep.
something that we can revisit. But this was let me go in. I can just X this off or just hide it real quick. But if you see on this drop down here or this one that
We
pulls
don't
up,
we don't
oh
see it in
shoot,
here.
excuse me.
You're good.
Let me pull this up. Entire screen. Perfect. Okay. So let's see here. Okay. This is odd. Let me put up a new one. Maybe it'll come up then. I don't know. Maybe don't save that. And okay, that's interesting. Okay. So I thought that I had this already installed onto this one. I will look it up real quick so you guys can get this. This is a really nice tip. But this one has a bit of a learning curve to it. It's called Animax. Blender plugin add-on right here. This one is probably one of my favorites for procedural particle effects, but it's also just procedural animation in general. It's not a bad price, 25 bucks, but essentially what this does, it allows you to create animations procedurally versus with simulation. Just that's why I was, again, this goes into what the Claude code engines that I've been making are so cool because it does the same exact thing. When you are when you're built making anything with simulations, it can be a pain in the butt, especially to get into augmented reality, because it's all done through simulation. So you have to one pull out the simulation, then you have to um, uh, then you got to bake that simulation, and then you got to pray that it baked correctly. It's just a pain in the butt. Versus this is procedurally done, so it's done through algorithm, and you can on a dime change the way it actually, like for instance, you see this here, it's fracturing this this statue. You can adjust whether that fractions very smoothly and blows in the wind or it explodes off. That's all done through here, and then but like I said, this one is so you see right here all these different effects that it has. You can do attracting of the particles, having them sway and move, but a lot of people use this one just for pure motion graphics. So if you ever seen like stuff that you see on After Effects, where you see really cool like washing and neat little things that happen or popping up stuff, you can do all that with this, and it's because it's procedural. You can change any of those animations, how slow they are, how fast they, um, how much they explode. If you want a tiny explosion, you could do that all through numbers procedurally. Um, and let me see if there's a picture of it. But here, let me show you this real quick. So this is like type of animations that you can make with it, where it fractures, excuse me, where it fractures out, and I guess you can't. Oh, let me turn off the sound here. Fractures out and then reconstitutes back into another thing. Um, so that's this, and this is all done procedurally. So I can affect these animations on a dime. A lot of people they'll have like hundreds of squares and they'll just rotate the squares and make like a wave of rotating squares. These beautiful types of animations, and it's all done through their procedures that you can adjust and make look like a loop and all kinds of stuff. It's a bit more advanced because of that learning curve of learning. This is like learning a whole new program. It's an add-on into Blender, but you got to think of it as a whole other another monster to get comfortable with. But this is one of my secret weapons because, as you see, like these types of animations, these simulations, they used to take forever, and they're not fun to work with in Blender, but this makes it so much more seamless. And one of the other things that it does really well is it fractures an object. So if you have an object that, for instance, you've generated on Meshy, and you want to see that blow up and explode into pieces or fracture into 1,000 pieces, it has a part of the program that fractures out that object, whatever you have. I don't know if you can see this right here, but these little cuts that go inside of uh, the um, the object that you have, that's what it's using. It splits it up into 1,000 pieces, and then you use those thousands of pieces to do all the different animations that you might want to do. So it's like I said, it's a little bit more in depth. Maybe there could be like a course on just this and getting this down and this one particular add-on. But this is definitely one of my secret weapons. You can do so much with it. And I've definitely used it for things that is not meant for. And some of the coolest stuff that I come up with is like just manipulating this program to get very wild effects. Yeah. So this is a good one.
Nice. We'll put that one in the back pocket and think about it for maybe another time. But cool. Anyone else? And I saw Trish jumped in. Good to see you, Trish. Anyone have any questions before we head out for the day? Cool.
How you doing today? I just want to say this is amazing. This is epic. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, you actually covered what I was wondering about making instances real from projects that were just simulations, but doing this in the procedural with the Animax makes so much more sense. But have you combined what you output with that inside of Touch Designer using the 3D object side of things to make Touch Designer? I mean, Touch Designer is flawless. You just made my mind just meld Animax with Blender and Touch Designer. I don't know if that was a question, just a comment. Thank you so much for this. Now I have to go create something.
Right. I would say, same thing. A lot of things that apply for AR work very well because what the illust is kind of, doing is just essentially what any kind of platform that's taking a GLB is doing is like, taking in that data. So whatever a GLB can do is kind of really what the limitations are. And so when I'm thinking about even like what actually can like an instance, I'm glad you brought that up. Instances are a pain in the ass. Oh my gosh, you can get them to work and you can get them to export into GLB, but they're not going to contain any of the animations. So if you did any procedural animations with the instances, none of that carries over. I spent so much time trying to get that to go through. And where I realized instances are not the way unless you have all your instances connected to one empty and they have one movement that they're all doing together. But if you want that individual movement, like this star's going over here and they're having all this offset and everything, none of that carries over. And so the same thing like with Touch Designer or anywhere where you're importing a GLB file, you want to, make sure that it's the limitation of GLB itself. Now, if you explore other types of 3D files, then there's different things, but it's essentially, I would always kind of just stay away from instances and animation. They really only work well inside of Blender because Blender has its own systems and things that it's doing. But once you take that out of that environment, so much of that data does not carry over. So that's why these procedural animations are so much better because essentially they're baking into each individual object their own information, and you're not having to realize instances. You're not having to do any of that. It's all baked inside of that single inside of those individual objects itself. Now, with that though, you do have to be careful because that's a lot more information. For instance, if you're doing like that's why rigging is important because you're not rigging actually does carry over inside of GLBs, thank goodness. But if you ever worked with shape keys, way different because now instead of rigging a full arm that has like kind of like a cloud that it adjusts all the meshes based off of the different the bones and what they're affecting. If you do shape keys, you're now affecting each one of those vertices individually. And so the information that it takes care, it just blows up the file. And so when you're animating procedurally, you're kind of animating like with shape keys. None of it's really rigged. all of those particles have their own individual motion paths, and they have their own set of vertices and faces and all that. And so you got to be careful because they could blow up the file size really easily when you start doing that fracturing. And then each one of those objects has its own individual animation data. It can get pretty hefty at file size. So that's my only caveat with the procedural animations. But is there's ways around it. Draco compression's great. Also, stuff that we're doing with Claude. I mean, Claude just naturally has a very optimized approach to everything when it makes it in Python. So yeah, as the caveats, the give and takes, but pushing that boundary, I think, is the most possible with procedural animation.
Okay, so awesome, Epic. I do have a request for a future class. Decentraland outputs, the things that are in Decentraland to illust would be epic and amazing because people love to see their avatars doing all the things. But also, if we could just have that as a standalone, you just did whatever you were doing with MetaWolf and with all of the fun crew, that would be epic for future state. Okay, love y'all.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. We can't hear you,
You're
Rob.
Hey, as always, epic session out of body. Yeah, if yeah, I should have the recording up probably by tonight. So if you weren't able to check it all out, but yeah, and the next week we're gonna be doing Q&A. So I think yeah, bring your questions to next week's chat, and then following week we're gonna be doing a lidar, Gaussian splats, and photogrammetry session with a friend Nick Kaufman. He's with a project called In Situ. But yeah, we're gonna start kind of talking about like cultural archiving, digital twins, all that kind of good stuff with using those processes. But yeah, again, thank you so much, Out of Body, for your time, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. So, cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
everyone. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Boom, ding, dong,